June 6, 1944. Normandy coast, France. At 0530 hours, more than 5,000 Allied vessels stood off a 50-mile front. By midnight, 156,000 troops were ashore against roughly 50,000 German defenders. German pre-invasion planning assumed the assault would fail if 15% of landing craft were destroyed in the first hour. Verified after-action tallies show losses under 2%. By 0900 hours, the 352nd Infantry Division reported most coastal guns silent and communications cut. While 7th Army relayed urgent requests for armor, Hitler's staff, still convinced the main attack would strike the Pas-de-Calais, withheld the Panzer Reserve. The Oberkommando der Wehrmacht War Diary later summarized the morning as the hour the Western fortifications ceased to function as a defense system. One calendar day converted concrete into a liability, exposed command paralysis, and set in motion a logistical contest Germany could not win. The figures were not just impressive. They were decisive. The question is how those numbers were created, and why the wall failed so quickly. The staff officer placed Directive Number 40 on the drafting table beside organization tote blueprints and monthly concrete reports. It was late 1942, and the Reich's new policy was clear. Fortify the entire coastline from Norway to Spain. The promise was simple. An impregnable belt would throw any invasion back into the sea. Hitler himself repeated the phrase at every conference. Fortress Europe, the words sounded grand. The engineering reality proved more complicated. Organization Todt, the Reich's construction arm, began pouring concrete along the Channel coast. The numbers grew quickly. By early 1944, coastal inventories listed roughly 15,000 bunkers, 1,200 artillery positions, 500 batteries. The scale was enormous. 17 million cubic meters of concrete had been poured. On paper, the Atlantic Wall looked invincible. Engineers drew neat lines on maps. Strong points covered every beach. Artillery fields of fire overlapped. Minefields stretched inland. The wall existed as a concept, a doctrine, a promise. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt commanded Oberbefehlshaber West, Supreme Command West. He reviewed the reports from his headquarters outside Paris. The numbers were impressive. But Rundstedt was a professional. He knew that concrete alone did not win wars. He knew that a static defense needed depth, reserves, mobility. He requested more divisions. He asked for armored units close to the coast. Berlin sent him static infantry divisions filled with older men, teenagers, and conscripts from occupied territories. Many had no transport beyond bicycles. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel arrived in early 1944 to inspect the coastal defenses as commander of Army Group B. Rommel had fought the British in North Africa. He knew what Allied air power could do. He knew what naval gunfire could achieve. He drove along the beaches from Cherbourg to Calais. What he saw alarmed him. The Atlantic Wall existed largely on paper. Engineering inspections revealed the truth. Only 8% of sites had completed underground magazines. Fewer than 3,000 strongpoints were fully operational. The average artillery density in Normandy was roughly 1 gun per kilometer. Planning factors had called for 5 times that number. Rommel wrote a memorandum on 22 February 1944. He warned that the wall exists largely on paper. He urged commanders to double mine density. He ordered beach obstacles increased. He wanted hedgehogs, Belgian gates, and stakes driven into the sand below the high tide line. He designed new obstacles against gliders, poles planted in fields, which troops soon called Rommel's asparagus. He worked with frantic energy. But time and resources were running out. The bunkers themselves were engineering marvels. Reinforced concrete walls 2 meters thick, steel doors, ventilation systems, ammunition storage. The designs came from Regelbau standardized construction plans. A 612 casemate housed a 15.5 centimeter gun. A 667 bunker protected a 5 centimeter KWK anti-tank gun. Tobruk positions, small concrete rings, held machine guns or mortars. Every Widerstandsnest, resistance nest, had a number. WN62 overlooked Omaha Beach. WN33 covered gold. The system looked methodical. But the system had fatal gaps. Ammunition scales called for thousands of rounds per gun. On-hand stocks averaged less than half. Reinforced rebar was in short supply. Armored cupolas, rotating steel domes for observation, were rare. Many bunkers lacked telephone cables. Radios were scarce. Communication depended on wires strung along poles, vulnerable to bombardment. Labor shortages plagued construction. Organization Todt relied heavily on forced labor from occupied nations. Workers had little motivation. Quality suffered. Allied bombing compounded the problems. French rail hubs were struck repeatedly through the spring. Cement deliveries slowed. Monthly Organization Todt reports noted the shortfalls. Every delay pushed completion dates further. By June, the wall remained unfinished. Heeresgruppe B, Army Group B, compiled inspection tables in the spring of 1944. Coastal batteries were listed by caliber, serviceability, and ammunition days on hand. The numbers told a grim story. Many positions had ammunition for less than 1 day of sustained fire. Dispersed depots meant resupply under fire would be slow or impossible. The Atlantic Wall's design assumed a linked system. Artillery would engage ships at long range. Mortars and machine guns would cover the beaches. Infantry in bunkers would hold the line while mobile reserves counterattacked. Air and naval superiority would deny the enemy reinforcement. But by June 1944, none of those assumptions held true. The Luftwaffe had been bled white over Germany. The Kriegsmarine had lost control of the Channel. Mobile reserves were held inland by Hitler's personal order. The wall was not a system. It was a collection of strong points, isolated and waiting. Later analysis would show the truth. Only 10% of the wall's nominal firepower engaged effectively on D-Day. Not because the guns were absent. Not because the crews lacked courage. The system linking them was hollow. Concrete could stop bullets. Could not stop the collapse of command and control. It could not overcome the arithmetic of 5,000 ships. The operations map in Oberbefehlshaber West headquarters showed panzer symbols scattered across France. Some were near Paris, others south of the Seine, a few in Brittany. None were on the coast. A courier entered with another dispatch from Field Marshal Rommel at La Roche-Guyon. The message repeated the same argument. The invasion must be crushed at the water's edge. Armor must be forward. Rundstedt read it and shook his head. The two field marshals disagreed fundamentally. Rundstedt believed in the classic counterstroke. Let the enemy land. Identify the main effort. Then smash it with concentrated armor. Rommel knew better. He had seen Allied fighter bombers in Africa. He knew that daylight movement of armor would be suicide. He argued that German forces had one chance. Destroy the invasion on the beaches in the first hours, before the Allies established air superiority and brought their overwhelming firepower to bear. Hitler sided with neither man completely. He kept several panzer divisions under his personal control. Panzer Lehr Division, 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, 21st Panzer Division. These units could not move without direct release from Führer Hauptquartier, the Führer's headquarters. The logic was simple. Hitler believed the Allies would feint in one location and strike the main blow elsewhere. He wanted to hold the armor until the true landing site was clear. The doctrine made sense in theory. In practice, it paralyzed the defense. Between 3 June and 5 June, requests came in daily. Rundstedt asked to shift armor west toward Normandy. Rommel sent urgent messages. 7th Army, responsible for Normandy, reported increased reconnaissance flights and naval activity. Every request went to Berchtesgaden. Every request awaited Hitler's decision. None were approved. General der Panzertruppe Fritz Bayerlein commanded Panzer Lehr. His division sat southeast of Paris, immobile. He could see what was coming. His staff could read the signs. But no order arrived. The doctrine assumed something else: rapid decision cycles. German military tradition valued initiative and speed. Auftragstaktik, mission-type orders, gave commanders freedom to act. But by 1944, Hitler had centralized control. Major decisions required his approval. The result was paralysis. Ultra-British signals intelligence, decrypted German communications. The intercepts confirmed the problem. Centralized decision-making created lags exceeding 12 hours once the landings began. 12 hours was an eternity in modern war. Technology compounded the problem. The armor park was formidable. Panzer IV OSV-H tanks with long 7.5 cm guns. Panther OSV-A with sloped armor and high-velocity cannon. Tiger tanks with 88 mm guns. On paper, these vehicles outclassed most Allied armor. But armor needs fuel. It needs bridging equipment. It needs clear roads. Allied air power owned the skies over France. RAF Typhoons and United States Army Air Force's P-47s carried rockets and bombs. Any column moving by daylight invited destruction. Luftwaffe strength in the West had collapsed. Dayfighter numbers were a fraction of 1943 levels. Most remaining fighters defended Germany against bomber streams. Flak anti-aircraft artillery was dispersed to protect cities and industry. Fuel allocations per division had been cut repeatedly. Panzerlehr had less than 10% of its authorized fuel scale in early June. Moving the division to Normandy would consume much of what remained. Rail movement offered an alternative. But Allied bombing and French resistance sabotage made rail transport hazardous. Plan Vert and Plan Vertbis, coordinated resistance operations, targeted locomotives, tracks, and signals. Between 4 June and 6 June, an estimated 508 locomotives and 1,200 railcars were destroyed or damaged. Key junctions were bombed. Bridges dropped into rivers. Tunnels blocked. The German rail network in France was a sieve. Oberbefehlshaber West submitted daily situation reports, Lodgebericht, to Berlin. The reports listed planned counterattack axes toward Cannes and Bayeux. They noted road interdiction. They tallied bridge status. 7th Army compiled movement timetables. Every calculation showed the same problem. Moving armor to Normandy under Allied air attack would take days, not hours. Every day would cost men and vehicles. And every hour of delay gave the Allies more time to consolidate. Field Marshal Rommel inspected the panzer divisions in May. He saw crews training on new equipment. He saw morale and discipline. He also saw the fuel trucks half empty. He saw the bridging columns incomplete. He understood what the numbers meant. If the invasion came and armor could not move immediately, the battle was lost. He sent another memorandum to Berlin. He requested release authority for at least one panzer division. The request was denied. The single decision to hold Panzerlehr and other armored divisions in Führerreserve created a window, a gap in time and space. Allied planners understood German doctrine. They knew the Wehrmacht would counterattack with armor. The entire invasion plan assumed it. Naval gunfire and air power were designed to destroy German columns on the march. But first, the columns had to move. Every hour Hitler delayed, the Allied lodgment grew stronger. By midday 6 June, more than 80,000 Allied troops and thousands of vehicles were ashore at Gold Beach and Juno Beach. No armored counterblow had materialized. The RAF photo interpreters arranged inflatable landing craft along the Kent coast. The dummies looked convincing from altitude, wooden frames covered in painted canvas. From 3,000 meters, they resembled the real LCT's landing craft tank, massed for invasion. German reconnaissance aircraft photographed the sites repeatedly. Analysts in Berlin and Paris studied the images. The concentration looked immense. Dover bristled with shipping silhouettes. Operation Fortitude was the deception plan behind Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion. The goal was simple. Convince the Germans the main landing would strike the Pas-de-Calais. The logic was obvious. Calais was the shortest crossing from England. Less than 35 kilometers of water. Calais was closest to Germany's industrial heartland. A thrust from Calais could reach the Ruhr in weeks. Allied planners knew German intelligence would think the same way. FUSAG, 1st United States Army Group, existed only on paper and in German minds. General George S. Patton was named commander. Patton's reputation as an aggressive armor commander was known to German intelligence. Radio networks sprang to life, transmitting dummy traffic. Agent networks, controlled by British intelligence through the XX Committee, fed reports to Berlin. The agents were doubles, their loyalty unknown to the Germans. Garbo, real name Juan Pujol Garcia, was the most effective. His reports were detailed and convincing. He described troop movements, equipment concentrations, embarkation schedules, all fictitious, all pointing to Calais. Allied deception was thorough. Inflatable tanks filled mock assembly areas. Dummy fuel depots appeared near non-existent divisions. The British constructed entire decoy ports with plywood and scaffolding. At night, lights burned in empty warehouses. Traffic signs directed phantom convoys. The investment was enormous. Hundreds of personnel devoted full-time to maintaining the illusion. German aerial reconnaissance focused overwhelmingly on the Pas-de-Calais. Between 1 June and 5 June, roughly 84% of Luftwaffe sorties over England concentrated there. Photo interpreters in Paris counted the landing craft. They tallied the divisions. Everything pointed to Calais. The reports went up the chain. Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, Armed Forces High Command, believed them. Hitler believed them. The Atlantic Wall's strongest defenses were in the Calais sector. 15th Army, defending Calais, was the strongest German army in France. Technology aided the deception. Moonshine, a radar countermeasure using aluminum chaff strips, created false radar echoes. On the night of 5 to 6 June, Allied aircraft dropped window over the Straits of Dover. German radar operators saw massive formations assembling. They reported convoys heading toward Calais. In reality, the echoes were metal strips drifting on the wind. The real invasion fleet sailed toward Normandy, beyond the radar coverage. B-Dienst, the German signals intelligence service, intercepted Allied communications. But the Allies controlled the traffic. Radio networks in southeast England transmitted false messages. Coordinated agent reports synchronized with the wireless deception. Quicksilver, a subplan of fortitude, created an entire fake order of battle. German intelligence files listed phantom divisions, fictitious corps, invented command structures. The deception was so complete that even after D-Day, many German commanders believed Normandy was a feint. The Oberkommando der Wehrmacht situation report dated 4 June stated clearly, main effort expected in Calais sector deployments reflected that assessment. Panzer divisions remained positioned to meet a Calais landing. Luftwaffe reconnaissance continued to concentrate on Dover. German radar stations along the channel were tuned to watch the straits. The strategic fixation was total. Intelligence failures are rarely simple. The Germans had ample reason to believe Calais was the target. Logic, distance, strategic importance all pointed there. Allied deception reinforced every preconception. Even skeptics found it hard to argue against the accumulated evidence. Intercepts, photographs, agent reports, everything confirmed the same conclusion. The Allies would strike Calais. On the evening of 5 June, German radar stations detected anomalies. Large formations appeared off Calais. Operators reported the contacts. Alerts went out. Units in the 15th Army sector stood to. Coastal batteries manned their guns. Officers scanned the darkness, waiting for the assault. Nothing came. The radar contacts were ghosts, chaff clouds, drifting and dissipating. Meanwhile, farther west, the real invasion armada approached Normandy. More than 5,000 ships moved through the darkness. Minesweepers cleared lanes. Battleships and cruisers took up bombardment positions. Transports carrying paratroopers droned overhead. German radar on the Normandy coast detected activity, but the reports were fragmented. Communications were poor. Observers reported aircraft, but drops were scattered. The scale was unclear. When the first Allied paratroopers landed in Normandy shortly after midnight, German intelligence still believed the main attack would come at Calais. 7 of 10 panzer divisions in France remained positioned north and east of the Seine. 352nd Infantry Division in Normandy, a static coastal defense unit, had no panzer support within immediate reach. The deception had worked. The Germans were looking the wrong way. The cost of that misallocation would become clear within hours. Once the landings began, Reassessment took time. Commanders requested reconnaissance. Analysts compared reports. Debates raged over whether Normandy was the main effort or a diversion. Hitler himself hesitated. He had predicted a feint. Now he wondered if his prediction was correct. The paralysis lingered through the morning. Panzer divisions stood idle, awaiting orders. The orders did not come. By the time German high command accepted that Normandy was the true invasion, the window had closed. Allied troops were ashore in strength. Naval gunfire controlled the approaches. Air superiority was absolute. The counterstroke that might have succeeded in the first hours was no longer possible. Deception had bought time. Time had bought success. At 0300 hours, naval plotting rooms aboard Allied warships marked fire missions on acetate overlays. Bombardment cruisers and battleships reported readiness. Gun crews loaded armor-piercing and high-explosive shells. Fire control officers checked ranges and bearings. Offshore, bomber streams assembled under thick cloud. Pathfinders dropped flares over inland targets. The air hummed with engines. The sea trembled with the mass of steel. Plans assumed heavy bombardment would neutralize coastal strongpoints before the first infantry touched the sand. The tonnage committed was unprecedented. Roughly 7,600 tons of bombs were scheduled for delivery on Normandy targets in the pre-dawn hours. Battleships carried 14-inch and 16-inch guns. Cruisers mounted 6-inch and 8-inch batteries. Destroyers added 5-inch guns. The weight of fire was staggering. Reality fell short of expectations. Overcast obscured targets. Bomber crews, ordered to delay release slightly to avoid hitting assault craft, dropped many loads inland. Post-strike analysis found that only 17% of bombs struck designated Widerstandsnester and batteries. Many strongpoints remained intact when the landing craft approached. Yet the bombardment achieved critical effects. Radar posts were blinded. The station at Douvres reported equipment destroyed. Communication cables, strung above ground, were severed by blast and shrapnel. Ammunition dumps detonated. Fire and smoke disrupted German coordination. United States Navy fire control parties prepared to land with the first waves. Their mission: direct naval gunfire onto targets that threaten the beaches. German battery commanders at Longues-sur-Mer found their land lines cut within the first hour. They resorted to visual fire direction, estimating ranges by eye. Accuracy dropped sharply. RAF Bomber Command and United States Army Air Force's 8th and 9th Air Forces compiled mission logs. Bomb releases were tallied by target group. Results were mixed. Some bunkers suffered direct hits. Others remained untouched. But the cumulative effect was disruption. Battleships USS Texas and USS Nevada brought 14-inch guns to bear. HMS Rodney fired 16-inch shells weighing more than a ton each. Cruisers added rapid fire. Destroyers closed to near point-blank range, risking mines and return fire. Radar-ranged gunnery improved accuracy over visual methods. Pre-registered fire plans assigned each battery a sector. Shore fire control parties carried radios tuned to naval frequencies. The system worked. Calls for fire brought shells within minutes. Counter-battery duels erupted. German guns in Regelbau casemates, some mounting 155mm and 105mm pieces, fired back. Naval spotters noted splashes. Return fire was directed onto German positions. The duel was unequal. Allied ships carried thousands of rounds. German coastal batteries had limited ammunition. Resupply required trucks or trains moving under air attack. Few supplies arrived. The United States Army Corps of Engineers conducted a post-operation survey. They inspected bunkers along the invasion front. The report listed percentage of penetrations, casualties inflicted, suppression times. Many bunkers showed cracks from near misses. Some had collapsed fronts. Others remained structurally intact but had lost communications and ammunition. The 352nd Infantry Division morning log, Kriegstagebuch, noted severed lines by 0500 hours. Battalion headquarters could not reach company strongpoints. Company commanders could not reach platoon positions. Isolation magnified fear. At Utah Beach, the bombardment achieved exceptional results. 23 of 27 major gun positions were suppressed or destroyed before the first landing craft touched down. Infantry losses at Utah were the lightest of any beach. Exits from the sand were secured quickly. The cause was clear. Effective preparatory fire eliminated German artillery that could have raked the beach. Fortifications designed to channel attackers into kill zones were neutralized or bypassed. The bombardment's greatest success was not precision. It was disruption. The Atlantic Wall functioned as a system. Observers spotted targets. Radios or telephones relayed coordinates. Batteries engaged. Infantry in bunkers held the line. Command posts tracked the battle. The bombardment broke the system. Observers were killed or blinded. Radios were smashed. Telephone cables were cut. Batteries fired blind or not at all. Infantry in bunkers fought isolated, without orders or support. Command posts lost contact. German doctrine relied on a linked defense. Each strong point supported its neighbors. Interlocking fields of fire prevented gaps. Mobile reserves counterattacked breaches. The bombardment turned the wall into disconnected points. Each strong point became a lone fortress. Crews inside heard nothing but the crash of shells. When the barrage lifted and infantry appeared, they fought as best they could. But they fought alone. The numbers tell the story. Allied naval forces fired tens of thousands of shells on 6 June. German coastal artillery expended most of its on-hand ammunition by midday. Resupply never came. The guns fell silent not from lack of courage, but from lack of shells. The system had failed. The Atlantic Wall, designed to function as a coordinated whole, dissolved into fragments under the weight of fire. Concrete survived. The defense did not. Landing craft dropped ramps into cold water. Men stepped off expecting thigh-deep surf. An unexpected lateral current pushed boats east. Some units landed hundreds of meters from planned positions. Engineers carrying demolition charges found water deeper than briefed. Waterproofing failed. Bangalore torpedoes and Higginson packs were soaked. Explosives misfired. The plan began to unravel before the first minute passed. Omaha Beach stretched from Vierville-sur-Mer to Colleville-sur-Mer. Planners had assumed pre-landing fires would suppress strong points. WN-60, WN-62, WN-70, WN-72, the numbered resistance nests overlooking the beach, had been targeted heavily. But many bombs fell inland. Cloud and timing errors scattered the effort. When the ramps dropped, German machine guns opened fire immediately. United States 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions faced the 352nd Infantry Division. Intelligence had estimated a single regiment in the sector. In reality, the 352nd had been reinforced beyond expectation. Fresh battalions held the high ground. MG-42 machine guns, cyclic rate 1,200 rounds per minute, interlocked their fields of fire. Gunners traversed left and right, cutting down men as they waded ashore. Casualties among the first waves approached 1,000 within 2 hours. Companies lost half their strength in minutes. Officers and sergeants fell. Radios were destroyed. Boats burned. Bodies floated in the surf. Men huddled behind beach obstacles. Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, wooden stakes tipped with teller mines. Mortar rounds burst among them. Artillery shells from inland batteries added to the carnage. General Omar Bradley commanded 5th Corps from the cruiser USS Augusta offshore. Reports arriving at his command post were fragmentary and grim. Some companies had ceased to exist as fighting units. Engineers struggled to clear obstacles. Tanks, duplex drive Shermans, designed to swim ashore had launched too far out. Rough seas swamped most. Only a handful reached the beach. The plan had called for armor support. The infantry fought without it. Colonel George A. Taylor, commanding 16th Infantry Regiment, reached the beach and saw the chaos. His recorded exhortation became famous. 2 kinds of people are staying on this beach: the dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here. The words were blunt. They worked. Small groups began moving. Bangalore torpedoes finally breached wire. Hagenson charges blew gaps in obstacles. Smoke from burning grass provided concealment. Inch by inch, the infantry advanced. German strongpoints held. WN-62 dominated the center of Omaha. Its casemates housed 75mm and 50mm guns. MG-42s covered every approach. The position was a fortress, but it had weaknesses. Rear access was exposed. Ammunition stocks were limited. The crew inside could not see the full beach due to smoke and dust. They fired at sounds and movement, expending rounds rapidly. United States Navy destroyers closed the beach. USS Satterley, USS McCook, HMS Talabant, destroyers not designed for shore bombardment, came within 1,000 meters of the surf. Point-blank range for naval guns. Fire control parties ashore called targets. Destroyers engaged casemates directly. 5-inch shells struck concrete at flat trajectories. Some penetrated firing slits. Others blasted away frontal armor. The risk was enormous. Destroyers risked grounding or mines. Captains accepted the risk. The alternative was watching the infantry die. By mid-morning, incremental gains accumulated. One squad breached a minefield. Another flanked a machine gun nest. Engineers blew a gap through wire. Bangalore torpedoes collapsed a section of trench. Each success was small. Together, they cracked the defense. WN-62 began taking fire from multiple directions. His crew fought on, but ammunition dwindled. Resupply was impossible. Naval fire interdicted every approach. By noon, the crew had fired its last rounds. Survivors surrendered or retreated inland. The 352nd Infantry Division Kriegstagebüch for 6 June records the situation. Artillery observation impossible. Forward companies without communication. Casualties heavy. Resupply none. German officers knew the battle was lost by mid-afternoon. Coastal strongpoints had fought isolated battles. Some held until dusk. None received reinforcement. None could be resupplied. The wall, as a defensive system, had ceased to exist. United States Army medical logs show casualty spikes by hour. The worst losses came in the first 2 hours. By evening, the rate had dropped. Not because German fire slackened, but because infantry had closed with the strongpoints and reduced them one by one. Engineers cleared lanes through obstacles. Follow-on waves landed and pushed inland. By nightfall, American troops held a lodgment roughly 2 kilometers deep. The perimeter was shallow, but it was secure. Omaha Beach earned its reputation as the bloodiest shore. United States casualties approached 3,000 killed, wounded, and missing. The 352nd Infantry Division lost roughly half its effective strength. Attrition that severe could not be replaced. German logistics had no reserve. The ammunition expenditure reports from surviving batteries show many fired their last rounds before noon. Naval interdiction prevented resupply trucks from reaching the coast. The defense had been bled white in a single morning. Royal Navy destroyers aligned bow on for rapid fire at 0700 hours off Gold and Juno beaches. Canadian assault companies unloaded universal carriers, tracked utility vehicles, while Churchill AVREs, assault vehicle Royal Engineers, prepared to breach obstacles. The British-Canadian attack differed from Omaha in timing and technique. Lessons from rehearsals had been learned. Combined arms coordination was tight. German 716th Infantry Division defended the sector. A static coastal defense formation, the 716th was thin and under strength. Many soldiers were Ostruppen volunteers or conscripts from occupied Soviet territories. Morale varied. Equipment was dated. Anti-tank guns were few. Armor support was non-existent. Against a well-coordinated assault, the division faced steep odds. Strong Point WN-33 covered Asnells and Arromanches. Its casemates housed machine guns and a 75mm gun. Concrete walls were thick. Firing slits commanded the beach. The position resisted initial landings. Canadian infantry took cover behind seawalls and dunes. Naval gunfire was called. HMS Ajax, a veteran cruiser, engaged WN-33 with 6-inch guns. Shells struck the position repeatedly. Concrete chipped and cracked. Still, the strong point fought. AVRE vehicles approached. These specialized Churchills carried spigot mortars, 290mm petard projectors, designed for bunker demolition. The weapon fired a 40-pound explosive charge nicknamed the Flying Dustbin. Range was short. Accuracy was poor. But at close quarters, the petard was devastating. An AVRE stopped within 50 meters of WN-33. The commander fired. The charge arced through the air and struck the casemate front. The explosion was immense. The front wall collapsed inward. German defenders inside were killed or stunned. Canadian infantry rushed the position. Resistance ended. Sherman Crab flail tanks. Shermans fitted with rotating chains to detonate mines, cleared lanes through minefields. Tracks chewed through sand, detonating Teller mines. Engineers followed, marking safe paths. DD tanks, duplex drive Shermans, arrived closer to H-hour than at Omaha. Launching nearer shore in calmer water, more survived. Armor provided covering fire as infantry advanced. Major General Douglas Graham commanded 50th Division at Gold Beach. Major General R.F.L. Keller led 3rd Canadian Infantry Division at Juneau. Both commanders emphasized coordination. Forward observation bombardment links, radio nets connecting infantry observers to naval fire control, worked smoothly. Calls for fire brought shells within minutes. German positions were systematically suppressed or destroyed. 716th Infantry Division staff noted piecemeal destruction in their logs. Communication with higher headquarters was lost early. Battalion commanders acted independently, attempting to hold their sectors. Without coordination or reserves, each position fell in turn. By midday, the division had lost cohesion. Soldiers surrendered in groups. Roughly 800 prisoners of war were taken from Gold and Juneau sectors by evening. Canadian after-action reports list casualties at approximately 1,074. Against that, roughly 14,000 men landed by nightfall. The ratio was the best of any beach on D-Day. The cause was clear: effective combined arms integration, strong naval fire support, and specialized engineering equipment. Obstacles that stalled attackers at Omaha were breached quickly at Gold and Juneau. Infantry that might have been pinned down advanced under covering fire. British-Canadian troops captured artillery and equipment. Sector returns recorded roughly 50 tanks, 12 guns, and hundreds of small arms taken. Ammunition dumps were seized intact. German defenders had not had time to destroy supplies before being overrun. The speed of the advance prevented scorched earth tactics. By 1800 hours, British-Canadian forces held ground 8 kilometers inland. Cruelly was in Allied hands. Contact with airborne elements south of the beaches had been established. The perimeter had depth. German planners had labeled such an outcome mathematically impossible if coastal guns remained intact. The guns had been there. The system linking them had not. Royal Navy ammunition expenditure sheets show over 100 rounds of 4.7-inch fired on WN-33 alone. Similar barrages fell on other strong points. The expenditure was immense, but ammunition was plentiful. Allied logistics ensured no ship ran dry. German defenders, by contrast, had no such luxury. Once on-hand stocks were expended, silence followed. The British-Canadian success demonstrated a principle. Combined arms warfare, executed with coordination and adequate resources, could crack static defenses. The Atlantic Wall, designed to stop frontal assaults, had no answer to flail tanks, petard mortars, and massed naval gunfire. Concrete could withstand some punishment, could not withstand everything, applied relentlessly. German after-action reports, compiled from surviving officers' accounts, noted that the defense lacked depth, reserves, and mobility. Strong points fought bravely, but isolated fortifications without support could only delay defeat. The 716th Infantry Division ceased to exist as a combat formation by the end of 6 June. Remnants retreated inland. No counterattack materialized. The wall had been breached. The door to France stood open. A duty officer at La Rocheguyon placed successive invasion dispatches on Field Marshal Rommel's map table. Rommel was not there. He had departed for Germany the previous day to visit his wife on her birthday and to meet Hitler. Army Group B headquarters tried to manage the crisis without him. Requests for armor release accumulated. The telephone line to Führer Hauptquartier in Berchtesgaden remained awaiting decision. German doctrine emphasized decisive armored counterstrokes. Panzer divisions were the Wehrmacht's sword. Speed and concentration could shatter an enemy lodgment. Doctrine required rapid response. Reality delivered paralysis. Adolf Hitler slept late on 6 June. His staff hesitated to wake him. Reports from Normandy seemed confused. Was this the main attack, or a diversion before the real blow at Calais? Rundstedt at Oberbefehlshaber West Headquarters in Versailles requested release of 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and Panzer Lehr Division at 0730 hours. Berlin acknowledged the request. No authorization followed. Hours passed. At 1400 hours, more than 6 hours after the request, approval finally came. By then, daylight ruled the roads. General Fritz Bayerlein commanded Panzer Lehr. His division was among the best equipped in the Wehrmacht. Panther and Panzer IV tanks, self-propelled guns, mechanized infantry. In peacetime, the move from southeast of Paris to Caen would take less than a day. In June 1944, under Allied air supremacy, the move became a nightmare. Bayerlein later recalled, "By the time permission came, the roads no longer existed. Allied tactical air forces owned the skies. 2nd Tactical Air Force, British and Commonwealth squadrons, and 9th Tactical Air Command, United States Army Air Forces, flew cab-rank missions. Fighter bombers orbited over France, waiting for calls from forward air controllers. Typhoons carried rockets. P-47s dropped 500-pound bombs. Targets were any vehicles on the roads. German columns moving by daylight were slaughtered. Panzer Lehr began its movement toward Caen in mid-afternoon. Within hours, air attacks began. Rockets struck trucks. Bombs cratered roads. Burning vehicles blocked narrow Norman lanes. Crews abandoned tanks and took cover in ditches. By nightfall, the division had advanced perhaps 15 kilometers. Normal march speed would have covered 10 times that distance. The division's war diary recorded losses. Dozens of trucks destroyed, fuel bozers burning, casualties mounting. 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend faced similar problems. The division started north of Caen, closer to the beaches. It should have reached the invasion front by evening. Air attacks and traffic congestion slowed movement to a crawl. Companies arrived piecemeal, unable to coordinate. By the time elements of 12th SS engaged Canadian forces near Caen, the opportunity for a decisive counterstroke had passed. Allied troops were dug in. Naval gunfire supported them. The German attack met prepared defenses and was repulsed with heavy losses. General Alfred Jodl commanded the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht Operations Staff. His diary for 6 June reflects the confusion at the highest levels. Early entries note the Normandy landings but express doubt about whether this is the Hauptstoß, main effort. Later entries mention growing Allied strength but still reference the possibility of a Calais landing. The cognitive dissonance was fatal. German high command hesitated when speed was essential. Luftwaffe strength over Normandy was negligible. Luftflotte 3 Air Fleet 3, responsible for France, mustered roughly 319 sorties over all of France on 6 June. Allied air forces flew approximately 14,674 sorties. The ratio was 46-1. German pilots who flew that day described it as suicide. Allied fighters swarmed. Flak from ships was intense. Few German aircraft reached the beaches. Those that did accomplished little. 7th Army signal logs list 24 bridges out of service and roughly 60% net disruption of communications by midday. Rail movement was impossible. Road movement was hazardous by day. Night movement was slow and constrained. German march tables, planning documents showing movement rates, assumed roads, bridges, and daylight. Actual progress fell far short. Interdiction turned the theoretical into the impossible. Bodenstandage divisions, static infantry divisions, lacked organic transport. Many had only bicycles and horse-drawn carts. Orders to move to Normandy meant requisitioning civilian vehicles or marching on foot. Either way, speed was measured in kilometers per day, not per hour. Reinforcements that might have stabilized the line in the first critical days arrived too late or not at all. The release delay and subsequent interdiction turned Germany's armored reserve into a wasting asset. Panzer divisions intended to deliver a knockout blow spent days crawling toward the front under constant air attack. Fuel was consumed. Vehicles were destroyed. Crews were exhausted. By the time units arrived in strength, the Allied lodgment was secure. Naval gunfire covered the flanks. Air superiority was absolute. The German counterstroke had been reduced to costly, piecemeal attacks that bled strength without achieving decision. The Atlantic Wall failed not in the morning's bombardment, but in the afternoon's unanswered telephones. Command paralysis at Berchtesgaden, doctrinal confusion between Rundstedt and Rommel, and Hitler's insistence on personal control of reserves created a window. In that window, Allied forces landed, consolidated, and dug in. When German armor finally moved, it moved into a killing zone. The system, fortifications, command structure, mobile reserves was supposed to function as a whole. Instead, each piece failed in sequence. The result was inevitable. A beachmaster stood on Omaha Beach with a clipboard, tracking tonnage per hour. Dukus, six-wheeled amphibious trucks, rolled ashore carrying supplies. Behind them, prefabricated harbor sections approached under tow. The invasion was less than 24 hours old, and already logistics was flowing. The Atlantic Wall had been designed to deny ports. The Allies brought ports with them. German planning had assumed port denial would starve the invasion. Cherbourg, Le Havre, Dieppe, all major ports were heavily fortified. Demolitions were prepared. If the Allies landed, German doctrine called for destroying port facilities before withdrawal. The logic was sound. Modern armies consume enormous quantities of supplies. Ammunition, fuel, food, medical stores, spare parts, all must flow continuously. Without ports, an invasion would wither. Allied planners knew this. The solution was Mulberry, artificial harbors constructed from prefabricated components and towed across the channel. Phoenix caissons, massive concrete structures, would be sunk to form breakwaters. Whale roadways, floating piers, would connect the caissons to shore. The concept was ambitious. The engineering was unprecedented. Within 72 hours of the landing, approximately 104,000 tons of supplies, 50,000 vehicles, and 80,000 reinforcements crossed the beaches. Mulberry Harbor assembly began immediately at Arromanches and St. Laurent. By 10 June, throughput exceeded 9,000 tons per day. The numbers surpassed pre-invasion estimates by roughly 60%. British Admiralty logistics staff had planned the operation in meticulous detail. United States Navy Seabees, construction battalions, and Royal Engineers assembled Phoenix caissons offshore. Each caisson weighed thousands of tons. Scuttling them in precise positions required careful seamanship. Tides, currents, and winds complicated the work. Yet the schedule held. Sections arrived on time. Assembly proceeded around the clock. Rhinos, powered barges capable of ferrying tanks and trucks, shuttled between ships and shore. Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, was staged for installation. Fuel would flow directly from England to France through undersea pipes. The scale of preparation was staggering. Every detail had been considered. Every contingency planned. French resistance executed Plan Vert and Plan Vertbus with devastating effect. Rail sabotage targeted locomotives, rolling stock, switches, and signals. Between 4 June and 6 June, approximately 508 locomotives and 1,200 rail cars were destroyed or damaged. Allied bombing hammered rail junctions. Tunnels were collapsed. Bridges were dropped. German transport officers compiled loss reports with despair. The result was catastrophic for German logistics. Fuel arriving in Normandy fell to a fraction of demand. Panzer Lehr Division operated at less than 10% of authorized fuel scale. Ammunition resupply slowed to a trickle. Food convoys were interdicted. Medical supplies ran short. The Wehrmacht in Normandy was being strangled. British Admiralty Report number 175/44 documented harbor capacity. The report concluded that throughput exceeded expectations by approximately 60%. Within 5 days, United States 1st Army G4 logistics staff compiled tonnage tables daily. Every ton landed was recorded. Every vehicle tracked. The numbers climbed steadily. German quartermaster returns told the opposite story. Fuel on hand per division declined daily. Ammunition stocks dropped. Replacement equipment did not arrive. The disparity was stark. For every ton the Wehrmacht delivered to Normandy in the first week, the Allies landed roughly 6. The ratio made the eventual outcome a scheduling problem, not a tactical question. Beach group organization controlled traffic. Military police directed vehicles off landing craft. Salvage teams recovered damaged equipment. Repair units fixed broken trucks on the spot. Dump sites sprouted inland. Ammunition, rations, fuel, medical supplies, everything was sorted and stacked. Convoys formed and moved forward. The machine ran smoothly. Supply classes were prioritized. Class 3, petroleum, oil, and lubricants, received top priority. Tanks and trucks consumed fuel voraciously. Class 5 ammunition came next. Artillery fired thousands of rounds daily. Infantry needed rifle ammunition, grenades, mortar rounds. Class 1 rations followed. Soldiers must eat. Class 4 construction materials supported engineers. Class 2 clothing and individual equipment replaced losses. Allied logistics was not perfect. Congestion occurred. Vehicles bogged in sand. Supplies piled up waiting for transport inland. But the system adapted. Beach gradients were improved. Roads were reinforced. Traffic control evolved. Problems were solved faster than new ones appeared. The machine learned. German logistics had no such resilience. Rail movement was crippled. Road movement was hazardous. Fuel shortages prevented redistribution. Ammunition stocks could not be replenished. The system, designed for peacetime or for war with secure rear areas, collapsed under interdiction. Every cut rail line, every bombed bridge, every destroyed locomotive compounded the crisis. Logistical overmatch ensured that every tactical setback could be rapidly offset with fresh men and material. If a company suffered heavy casualties, replacements arrived within days. If ammunition ran low, convoys brought more. If tanks were knocked out, new tanks landed. The Allies could afford losses. Germany could not. The Atlantic Wall had been Germany's answer to Allied material superiority. Concrete and steel would offset numbers and production. But the wall required logistics to function. Ammunition to feed the guns. Fuel for generators. Food for the crews. Communication wire. Spare parts. Medical supplies. When logistics failed, the wall became a tomb. Strong points fought until their ammunition was gone, then fell silent. The system starved. For every ton the Wehrmacht delivered to Normandy in the first week, the Allies landed roughly 6. That ratio made the eventual outcome a scheduling problem, not a tactical question. The Lajkart situation map at Berchtesgaden showed 5 beachheads along the Normandy coast. A staff officer added colored pins marking Allied penetrations. A notation in the margin read, "Main effort still expected Calais." A dispatch rider arrived with fresh reports from 7th Army. The reports described heavy fighting, communications disrupted, coastal batteries silenced. Still, Hitler's headquarters hesitated. Adolf Hitler rose late on 6 June. His staff had debated whether to wake him with news of the invasion. They decided to wait. When he finally received the reports, his first reaction was caution. He had predicted the Allies would feint in one location to draw reserves, then strike the main blow elsewhere. Normandy might be that feint. Pas-de-Calais remained the logical target. Better to wait for clarity than commit reserves prematurely. General Alfred Jodel's operations log reflects that assessment. Early entries note the landings but question their significance. Only at 1600 hours, more than 10 hours after the first paratroops landed, were Panzerlehr and 12th SS Panzer directed toward Cannes. By then, Allied naval guns and air interdiction had sealed approach corridors. German columns attempting to move faced devastating fire. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel returned from Germany shocked by the situation reports. He had hoped to be present for the invasion. Instead, he learned of it while traveling. By the time he reached his headquarters, the battle was hours old. Decisions he would have made instantly had been delayed. The window for a decisive counterstroke had closed. German corps commanders requested air support. Luftwaffe 3 had no aircraft to spare. Most serviceable fighters were defending German cities against bomber raids. The few sent to Normandy were overwhelmed. Requests went unanswered. The Luftwaffe, once a symbol of German might, had become irrelevant in the West. Technology compounded German difficulties. Daylight armor movement under Allied air umbrella was suicidal. Night movement might have worked, but German forces lacked training and equipment for large-scale night operations. Fuel shortages prevented extensive rehearsals. Drivers unfamiliar with night movement made slow progress. Convoys bunched up. Traffic jams formed at bottlenecks. Every delay cost more time. Radio traffic congestion on German networks added to the chaos. Too many units trying to transmit on too few frequencies. Messages were garbled or lost. Commanders resorted to motorcycle couriers. Speed of communication dropped from minutes to hours. Modern war demands rapid information flow. The German command net was saturated. Naval gun observers controlled fires inland to road choke points. Cruisers and battleships engaged columns spotted by forward observers. Shells fell on crossroads and bridges. German units attempting to concentrate took casualties before reaching the front. The offshore fleet functioned as long-range artillery, interdicting movement deep inland. Ultra-decrypts, British signals intelligence, revealed German march orders and confusion. Analysts at Bletchley Park read German communications in near real time. The intelligence confirmed what Allied commanders suspected. German response was fragmented and slow. Orders issued at Berchtesgaden took hours to reach field units. By the time units moved, the situation had changed. Führer Hauptquartier diary notations capture the late release orders. Panzer Lehr, released 1400 hours. 12th SS Panzer, released 1430 hours. 21st Panzer, released 0900 hours but constrained by local commanders' caution and conflicting orders. Each delay measured in hours translated to thousands of Allied troops ashore and tons of supplies landed. Strategic misdiagnosis held decisive forces inert across the critical morning to midday window. Hitler's belief in a Calais main effort was not irrational. Intelligence supported it. Logic reinforced it. But it was wrong. And in war, being wrong at the decisive moment is fatal. Once movement began, Allied fires transformed the counterattack into attritional road marches. 2 elite panzer divisions advanced a combined roughly 15 kilometers in 8 hours. Not for lack of will. Not for lack of equipment. For lack of a usable road network under enemy air and naval fire. The divisions arrived in Normandy piecemeal, exhausted, and under strength. The counterstroke that might have thrown the Allies back into the sea never materialized. The opportunity passed. A staff analyst at Allied headquarters pinned daily tallies on a board. Ships present: 6,939 vessels. Sorties flown: 14,674 Allied versus 319 German. Casualties: Allied approximately 10,249 killed, wounded, and missing. German, estimated 9,000 to 10,000. Guns knocked out hundreds. Prisoners taken, over 1,000. The numbers told a story. German coastal doctrine had assumed naval interdiction and air denial would not be decisive. The numbers proved otherwise. Allied fleet composition was overwhelming. Approximately 1,213 warships and 4,126 landing craft. German sea denial consisted of a handful of destroyers and roughly 35 S-boats, fast attack craft, active in the channel. The Kriegsmarine could harass, could not contest control. Air war statistics were even more lopsided. 14,674 Allied sorties on D-Day across France versus 319 Luftwaffe. The ratio was 46-1. German pilots who flew described swarms of enemy fighters. Flak from the fleet filled the sky. Few German aircraft returned. Fewer still inflicted damage. The Luftwaffe's inability to contest air superiority doomed the defense. Allied naval commanders reported gunfire effects exceeded expectations. Shore batteries that engaged were quickly suppressed. Counter-battery fire was overwhelming. German battery officers noted running out of ammunition within hours. Some positions fired their last rounds by noon. Resupply never came. Naval gunfire interdicted every road leading to the coast. Luftflotte 3 staff catalogued serviceable fighters. The inventory was grim. Most aircraft were grounded for lack of fuel or spare parts. Pilots were undertrained. Replacements were scarce. The Luftwaffe in the West was a hollow force, maintaining the appearance of strength without the substance. 7th Army compiled losses and ammunition requests. Tagesmeldung 421, Daily Report 421, dated 7 June summarized the situation. Coastal batteries destroyed. Infantry dispersed. No reserves available, the message was blunt. The defense had collapsed. Strong points that survived were isolated. No counterattack could be mounted. The army needed everything: ammunition, fuel, reinforcements, air support. None would arrive in sufficient quantity. Allied naval ammunition logs documented expenditure. Battleships fired hundreds of rounds. Cruisers thousands. Destroyers tens of thousands. The fleet carried vast stocks. Ammunition ships waited offshore to replenish magazines. German coastal batteries, by contrast, had only what was on hand. Once magazines were empty, the guns fell silent. Daily casualty returns showed Allied losses concentrated in the first hours. Omaha Beach accounted for roughly 1/3 of total Allied casualties on 6 June. But Allied replacement pipelines refilled losses within days. Fresh divisions waited in England. Casualty replacements were processed and shipped. The machine absorbed losses and continued. German manpower and fuel deficits were structural. Losses could not be easily replaced. Infantry divisions were already under strength. Panzer divisions operated below authorized equipment levels. Fuel allocations had been cut repeatedly. Every loss was permanent. Every casualty irreplaceable. The Wehrmacht in the West was wasting away. Technology and attrition created a feedback loop. Radar-directed naval gunnery suppressed coastal batteries. Fighter-bomber cab-rank procedures destroyed German columns. Beach maintenance groups repaired landing craft at scale, enabling continuous flow. German forces fought without air support, without naval support, without adequate supply. Courage could not compensate. German ammunition scales specified tons of shells per battery per day. Consumption rates at Widerstandsnister on 6 June exceeded scales by factors. Crews fired faster than doctrine allowed, expending stocks in hours. Minefields, intended to channel attackers, were degraded by surf and earlier flooding. Many mines failed to detonate. Gaps appeared without deliberate breaching. The statistical asymmetry converted tactical success into operational inevitability. Isolated German strongpoints could kill assault troops. They did. Casualties were heavy. But without a linked system and mobile reserves, strongpoints could not prevent expansion of lodgements. Each position fought alone. Each fell in turn. The wall, funded at more than 3 billion Reichsmarks, ceased to function in roughly 72 hours. Not because concrete failed, because the system around it collapsed. Engineers laid fuel hose along a hedgerow while traffic control posts directed a continuous stream of trucks inland. At nearby depots, supply personnel sorted ammunition and rations. Overhead, Allied fighters patrolled. Offshore, the fleet maintained its presence. The lodgement was expanding. German rail columns, attempting to approach Normandy, moved under constant air alarm. German plans had anticipated holding the Allies near the shore and striking them before consolidation. By 9 June, The separate beachheads had linked into a continuous front roughly 15 kilometers deep and 80 kilometers wide. Allied strength ashore exceeded 300,000 men. German artillery stocks were down by 97% in some sectors. Roughly 40% of remaining guns lacked ammunition. Reinforcements moving by rail suffered losses en route approaching 70% from air attacks. Field Marshal Rommel drafted a report to Hitler on 10 June. The memorandum was blunt. The situation was hopeless without withdrawal or massive reinforcement. Allied air superiority made daylight movement impossible. Naval gunfire reached 15 kilometers inland. German forces were fighting with depleted ammunition and no prospect of resupply. The defensive line could not hold indefinitely. Allied engineer battalion diaries noted rapid pipeline and depot establishment. Fuel lines extended over 100 miles within the theater by 12 June. Ammunition dumps grew daily. Repair facilities operated around the clock. The engineers, often overlooked in accounts of combat, were winning the logistical war. Their work ensured the fighting troops never lacked supplies. German divisional quartermasters tabulated daily shortfalls. Fuel, ammunition, rations, all below requirements. Requests sent to higher headquarters went unanswered or returned with notes. Supply situation critical. No reserves available. Divisions were told to make do with what they had. Combat units learned to scavenge. Captured Allied supplies supplemented German stocks. But scavenging could not sustain operations. Movement control, Allied traffic management, pushed fuel depots forward. Road repair units filled craters and reinforced soft ground. Military police directed convoys, preventing congestion. The system was imperfect. Bottlenecks occurred, but problems were solved faster than they appeared. The logistical machine adapted in real time. German armored columns attempting night movement were constrained by limited infrared and night driving aids. Few German tanks had equipment for night operations. Drivers relied on convoy lights, which invited air attack if spotted. Bridge outages forced detours. Fuel rationing limited training. Units that might have moved rapidly in daylight crawled at night. Speed dropped to a fraction of normal rates. Luftwaffe reconnaissance photos showed expanding beach dumps and road networks. Analysts noted the scale of Allied buildup. Reports went to Berlin with warnings. Allied strength was growing faster than German reinforcements could arrive. The conclusion was inescapable. Time favored the enemy. Every day increased Allied advantage. German casualty and abandonment returns for coastal guns documented the collapse. Batteries along the invasion front, 97% destroyed, abandoned, or out of ammunition by mid-June in contested sectors. The Atlantic Wall's artillery, the backbone of the defense, had been silenced. Concrete bunkers remained. The weapons inside did not. Once the lodgment acquired depth, Allied artillery and airfields followed. Every kilometer inland multiplied German supply friction. Forward Allied units called fire from ship-based guns one day, land-based artillery the next. Air support transitioned from carrier-based to land-based. Engineers built airstrips. Fighters and fighter bombers operated from French soil within days. Orders to throw the enemy into the sea continued to arrive from Berlin. Field commanders read them with bitterness. The orders no longer matched physical possibilities. Throwing the enemy into the sea required overwhelming force applied rapidly. German forces had neither. Strength had been bled away in piecemeal attacks. Reinforcements arrived too slowly. Supply shortages prevented sustained operations. On 15 June, Hitler ordered the Atlantic Wall reinforced. The order arrived 9 days after the wall's purpose had been overtaken by events. Reinforcement required labor, concrete, steel, time. None were available. The order was filed and ignored. Commanders focused on the immediate crisis, holding a line with inadequate forces against an enemy growing stronger daily. Rommel's memorandum text circulated among staff officers. Some agreed with his assessment. Others clung to hope that new wonder weapons or a political settlement might change the situation. Most simply fought on, doing their duty as soldiers. But privately, many knew the truth. Normandy was lost. The question was how long the fight would continue and at what cost. A logistics officer at Allied headquarters compared tonnage ledgers. Arrivals: Allied 2.1 million personnel and 450,000 vehicles by 1 August. Withdrawals: German forces across the Seine, depleted and disorganized. The numbers told the story. The invasion had become a campaign. The campaign was becoming a rout. German leadership hoped to stabilize on interior lines. Shorter supply routes, prepared defenses, reinforcements from the east, all might slow the Allied advance. But Allied buildup outpaced any German recovery. Every day brought more troops, more tanks, more supplies. The flow was relentless. Bombing of synthetic fuel plants reduced German options further. Luna, Merseburg, Politz, plants producing aviation and motor fuel, were struck repeatedly through the summer. Output dropped to roughly 10% of 1943 levels by late August. Luftwaffe fighters sat grounded for lack of fuel. Panzer divisions rationed every liter. Trucks and half-tracks operated on fumes. Albert Speer's Armaments Ministry staff acknowledged the crisis in internal memoranda. Tank hull counts rose on paper. Production of Panther and Tiger tanks actually increased through summer 1944. But fuel and trained crews did not. Tanks without fuel were monuments. Tanks without crews were targets. The Wehrmacht's strength was numerical, not operational. Allied G4 staffs recorded daily petroleum oil lubricants deliveries and ammunition stocks. The ledgers showed abundance. Fuel for every vehicle. Ammunition for every gun. Rations for every soldier. Medical supplies for every casualty. Spare parts for every breakdown. The logistics system functioned with industrial precision. Pluto began limited flow in August. Undersea fuel pipelines connected England directly to France. Thousands of tons of fuel crossed the channel without ships. The engineering was remarkable. The impact was measurable. Allied fuel stocks grew even as consumption increased. Expansion of temporary ports and reopening of captured French harbors added capacity. Cherbourg, though heavily damaged, began accepting ships in July. United States Red Ball Express, a dedicated truck convoy system, was planned to support the breakout from Normandy. Hundreds of trucks would run continuously, carrying supplies from Normandy beaches to forward dumps. The system anticipated rapid advance. Planners expected Allied forces to outrun their supply lines. The problem was anticipated and solved before it occurred. German logistics faced opposite problems. Locomotive and rolling stock deficits crippled rail transport. Bridge destruction along the Seine and Meuse isolated Normandy from the rest of France. Fuel shortages prevented redistribution. Divisions that might have been pulled back and refitted were trapped and destroyed. West of the Seine, German formations lost roughly 200,000 men in June through August. Combat, capture, stragglers, the losses mounted. Divisions ceased to exist. Armaments Ministry minutes noted fuel bottlenecks with bureaucratic understatement. Current allocations insufficient to maintain operational mobility. The reality behind the phrase was stark. Panzer divisions had fuel for tens of kilometers, not hundreds. Infantry divisions marched because they had no trucks. Artillery remained silent for lack of shells. The Wehrmacht in the West was dying of logistical starvation. Allied theater G4 summaries documented the buildup week by week. Tonnage landed, vehicles ashore, personnel strength. All climbed steadily. German Oberkommando des Heeres operational readiness tables showed opposite trends. Combat-ready armor declining. Battalion strengths dropping. Fuel and ammunition critically low in every sector. The graphs crossed. Allied strength rose. German strength fell. The immediate tactical breach on 6 June cascaded into strategic exhaustion by August. Fuel starvation, air inferiority, and attrition sealed the Western campaign's direction. Germany would fight on. Battles remained ahead. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The arithmetic was clear. The industrial system that sustained conquests from Norway to Greece in 1940 through 42 was, by late summer 1944, losing the war to spreadsheets. Fuel columns, sortie counts, Tonnage lifted, simple numbers determined victory. Germany could still produce weapons. It could not produce enough fuel to move them, enough ammunition to fire them, or enough trained men to crew them. The Wehrmacht fought with courage and skill. It fought at a material disadvantage that could not be overcome. An Allied assessment team compiled a final report in the months after Germany's surrender. Bunker plans, ammunition ledgers, 7th Army daily logs, documents stacked side by side. The team's mission was to understand how the Atlantic Wall failed so quickly. The answer lay in the numbers. The Atlantic Wall functioned as fortifications. It failed as a defense system. Post-war analyses found most works were unoccupied or undermanned at the decisive moment. Command delays and interdiction severed the connective tissue. Individual strongpoints performed as designed. The system did not. United States Army European Theater of Operations historians interviewed surviving German officers and compiled reports. British Cabinet Office analysts did the same. German officers completed questionnaires as part of the Foreign Military Studies series. The accounts were detailed and candid. Without fear of immediate reprisal, officers described what they had seen and what had failed. Technology ratios were stark. Approximately 6,939 Allied ships versus minimal German naval interference. 80 German aircraft over the beachhead on D-Day versus Allied air fleets. Bunker survivability was high. Concrete withstood remarkable punishment. But survivability meant nothing when cable cuts and observation suppression isolated each position. A strong point without communication, ammunition, or support is not a fortress. It is a grave. Mulberries and engineer units converted beaches into ports within days. The German assumption that port denial would cripple the invasion proved false. Allied ingenuity and industrial capacity brought solutions. Prefabricated harbors, floating roadways, amphibious trucks, underwater pipelines. Technology applied at scale solved problems German planners thought insurmountable. The United States Army European Theater of Operations final report included a summary line. The Atlantic Wall functioned as a line of fortifications but failed as a system of defense. The phrase captured the truth. Concrete and steel alone do not win wars. Systems win wars. Logistics, communication, command and control, combined arms coordination, these intangibles determine outcomes. Germany built fortifications. The Allies built a system. German returns noted that roughly 97% of coastal artillery pieces either were destroyed, abandoned, or lacked ammunition by mid-June in contested sectors. The guns existed. The shells did not. Or communication was cut. Or crews were killed. Or naval gunfire suppressed the position. Each failure had a specific cause. Together, they added to systemic collapse. Numbers, organization, and air-sea integration defeated static concrete. The wall's designers understood combined arms warfare. They planned for it. But they planned assuming Germany would retain air parity, naval presence, and mobile reserves. None of those assumptions held in June 1944. The defense was designed for a different war. The wall's collapse on 6 June accelerated Germany's defeat on the Western Front and compressed the war's remaining calendar. Without Normandy, the Allies would have landed elsewhere. Italy was already underway. Southern France would follow. Germany faced enemies on all sides, but Normandy provided the decisive front. The shortest path from the Channel to the Rhine. The route that ended in Berlin. Historians debated afterwards what might have changed the outcome. More concrete? Unlikely. Concrete was abundant. Better placement? Perhaps, but geography constrained options. More ammunition? Yes, but logistics could not deliver it. Faster release of armored reserves? Certainly, but Hitler's command style made that impossible. Each factor mattered. None alone was decisive. The failure was systemic. Soldiers who fought in the Atlantic Wall's bunkers did their duty. Many died at their posts. Others surrendered when ammunition was gone and resistance futile. Their courage was real. Their sacrifice was real. The system that sent them to those bunkers failed them. Concrete could not compensate for logistical failure, command paralysis, and material inferiority. The Atlantic Wall became a symbol of misplaced confidence. Massive investment in static defenses while mobile forces, logistics, and air power were neglected. The lesson was clear to post-war analysts. Fortifications have value, but wars are won by maneuver, logistics, and combined arms. Static defenses can delay. They rarely decide. The Atlantic Wall did not fall to courage or fear. It fell to arithmetic. 6,939 ships supported by overwhelming air and logistics against a defense designed for a past war. The numbers were decisive from the moment the first landing craft touched sand. Everything that followed was execution of a mathematical conclusion.